If you are looking to purchase a home this year and you're a Texas resident or moving to the state of Texas, then this is definitely a video that you want to watch, as I'm going to be breaking down the home buying process step by step and what to expect. So if you're a first-time home buyer, or if it's been a while since you've purchased a home and you just need a refresher on how the process works, you need to stay tuned, as I'll be covering everything from start to finish. So from the time you get pre-approved to the time you get the keys in hand, I'll be going over all of those steps for you. And if you like this video, don't forget to give me a like and leave me a comment on what you thought, and subscribe to my channel, because I will be posting more information about the real estate market, the home buying and selling process, and a lot of things that could be useful to you if you're looking to buy or sell anytime in the near future. So I'll go ahead and get started. And like I said earlier, I'm Ligaya Thompson, and I'm with Thompson Real Estate Group. I'm located in the Austin, Texas market. And if you're looking for a local realtor, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd love to talk with you more about what your real estate goals are and see how I can come up with the perfect strategy to help you get there. But without further ado, like I said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first step when it comes to purchasing a home is you need to determine how much is your purchasing power. And you do that by working with a lender to determine your budget. So if you don't know a lender, a realtor can make a couple of recommendations for you. However, once you've decided who you want to work with, then you go to that lender and they're going to go over all of your financials. And they're going to ask you questions like, are you going to be purchasing the home by yourself, or are you going to be using a cosigner? They're going to look at your DTI, which is debt to income, which means they're just going to see how much debt do you currently carry and how much income do you currently bring in. If you're self-employed, you are going to have to show about 2 years of your tax returns, just to show that you do make steady income and you are going to be able to carry a mortgage for the next 15 to 30 years. So once you have your pre-approval number, you're going to go to your realtor and you're going to tell them how much you're pre-approved for. And this helps you guys really narrow down your home search, because now we can look at what potential neighborhoods you can move into and how big or small of a house you're going to purchase. And they're going to ask you a lot of those questions too, but some of the main things they're going to want to know in the home buyer's consultation is, what is your current living situation now? So are you renting now? Because if you are renting now, then by when do you need to move out? When is your lease over? And what happens if we don't find that perfect home by the time your lease ends? So we need to know these things, because if your lease ends in 60 days, then we got to start looking for a house now. But if you have time, if you have 6 months, if you have 8 months, then we know, okay, we don't have to rush the process. We can just wait until we find the perfect home for you. Um, if you are a homeowner and you say, I currently own a property, but I'm going to want to sell the property. Well, okay, do you need to sell the property first in order to purchase a home, or are you okay with purchasing the home and then selling your property? Or are you going to keep this property and put it up for rent? So those are a lot of discussions that are going to be had in a home buyer's consultation. Another thing a realtor is going to want to talk to you about is, what do you want in a house? So are you looking for a single family structure, or are you looking for more so of a condominium type community? And when I say condominium type communities, they could be like high-rise condos, or you more so like your townhome type structure. But just keep in mind, when you're looking at a condominium, condominiums is more so the type of ownership versus the structure. So in a single family property, you have 100% ownership of that property. You're going to, maintain the yard, take care of the yard. You're going to maintain everything in that property, the roof, the interior, the exterior, the plumbing, versus a condominium type community. That specific condominium is going to help you with the maintenance. It doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be putting up any additional money for that type of maintenance, because those are all things that are going to be covered in HOA fees with condominium type communities. But your realtor will be able to explain that to you just a little bit more on, what type of property you're looking for. They're also going to ask you, do you live alone? Do you have children? If you have children, do you want to live close by your school, or are you okay with taking a little bit of a commute to get your kids to and from school? Where do you work? because if you have to drive into the office, are you going to be okay with a 20-minute drive to the office, or do you work remotely? If you work remotely, are you going to need that extra office space? If you are moving into a single family community, how big of a yard do you want? Because some families want big yards, some people don't. It just really depends on what all your preferences are, but you're going to narrow down how many bedrooms do you want? How many bathrooms do you want? Are you okay with a move-in ready property, or do you want to do something where you can put your own finishes to it after you move in? I mean, these are a lot of things to think about in the home buying process, but once they really narrow all of those things down for you, then you can start your home search. Okay, so once you've figured out the type of home that you want and the budget that you have, now you and your realtor can start the home search. And it is exactly what it says it is. You're going to be exploring different properties, different communities. You're going to be timing your drive times to places that are checkpoints for you. So how far is it from this neighborhood to the gym, to my church, to my job? Whatever it is, this is the part where you're really going to get to explore and look at houses. There's going to be open houses on the weekends, so you can go to open houses with your realtor. You can go to open houses without your realtor. I always recommend that if your realtor is available to go to the open house with you, have them go with you, because you might have some questions that come up. You want to make sure that your realtor is there to just guide you and help you with that. But other than that, this is the part where you really get to find the house that you like. And once you find that property, then you get to put an offer on the property. All right, so let's talk about making an offer on a property. So here's the fun part, in where we're going to officially put in an offer on a property. So your realtor is going to give you a contract. If it's a single family home, you're going to have a residential 1-to-4 contract. If it is a condominium home, it's going to be a condominium contract, which in the offer, the things that your realtor is going to need to know is, one, how much do you want to offer on this house? So just because a house is listed on the market for $500,000 doesn't mean you have to offer $500,000. So once you find the property that you like, then you're going to tell your realtor that you want to make an offer. What your realtor is going to do first, though, before you just put in an offer in, is they're going to run what's called comparables, or in short, comps. And what comps show you is what are like size homes that closed within a specific perimeter, usually no more than a mile, within the last 90 to 180 days. And they're going to see what it closed for, what was their square footage, what were the finishes like, and you're just going to compare those closing prices to the subject property that you're looking at. And based off of that data, you're going to come up with a number that you want to offer. So once you figure out what number you want to offer, your realtor is going to write up the contract. And in that contract, though, there's going to be quite a few things that you're going to need to think about. And there's going to be a couple of really important checkpoints in that contract. So listen up. This is the part that you really need to tune into. So when it comes to the offer, you're going to write, one, how much are you purchasing this house for? Or do you want to purchase this house for? How much are you going to put down? And then you're going to say, by when can you close? And usually your lender will tell you, okay, I can close in 30 days, I can close in 45, however it may be, but you're going to commit to a close date. And in that offer, you have to give up what is earnest money. And earnest money is typically 1% of the purchase price of the home. So if you're purchasing a $500,000 house, then your earnest money is going to be $5,000. And it's due in 3 days of going under contract. And you want to make sure you have cash on hand to submit the earnest money, because if that seller agrees to your offer and they go ahead and you go under contract on that property, you're going to have to turn in the earnest money within 3 days. So that's a very important step, because if you don't turn that in, then you lose the contract, and then you can lose the earnest money as well. And all earnest money really is just good faith that you are going to purchase this property. And in the contract, there are spots where you can lose your earnest money if you breach your contract. So it's really important that these deadlines that need to be hit get hit. That way you don't lose your earnest money. And don't be afraid, because in the contract, there are also parts of the contract where if you do decide you don't want to purchase this house, there are outs for the buyer in which the buyer can walk away from the contract and still get their earnest money back. And your realtor will really help you break that down. And then in addition to earnest money, you're going to have to talk about your option period. So your option period is a set amount of time that you have once you go under contract, and it starts from the day one of the contract being executed, but it's a set amount of time that you have to do all your due diligence on the property. So this is when you're going to get all your inspections done. You'll need to do a general home inspection, and general home inspections will vary on the size of the property, but it can be anywhere from $300-400 or more. Again, it all just depends on the size of the property. But your general home inspection is just going to go over everything in the house that needs to be repaired, isn't working, or not up to code. Now the seller doesn't necessarily have to fix any of those things, but based off of your findings, you can go back to the negotiation table during your option period and say, hey, this came up in the inspection, and therefore I would like the seller to take X amount off or contribute X amount or fix this before we close. Those are a couple of scenarios that you can renegotiate during your option period. But in addition to a general inspection, a couple of other things you might want to consider getting inspected depending on the age of the home would be getting the roof inspected, getting the foundation inspected, and getting electrical and plumbing inspected. Those are usually all of the big ticket items that if it's not a brand new home, I mean, if the home is a little bit older, if the roof is a little bit older, of course, or if, you know, the general inspection shows that the foundation is off in a certain corner of the house, then you want to bring in an expert in those areas. That way they can tell you if, you know, more work needs to be done on the property. And you, from there, again, you can renegotiate all of this during your option period. So you can say, hey, it came up that the foundation is bad. I want X amount off because this is how much it's going to cost, or I want the homeowner to fix that prior to moving. I mean, everything is a case-by-case scenario. But those are all the things that you can look at during your option period. And the other things you need to take a look at is your community, you know, the commutes, looking into the schools, looking into, you know, what's around. So where's your closest grocery store? I mean, all of that kind of goes into the community. But your option period really is where you get to do all of the research on the property. If there is a building being built across the street from your house, that's the time to find out what exactly is being built across the street from the house, because you don't want to buy a home and then next thing you know, they're building a gas station right in front of you and it's an eyesore, you know? Like, you want to know those things before you close on the property. Those are really important things, and those are things that your realtor will help you find out as well. But all of that is what goes on in the option period. And the option period is also a set amount that you pay. And it really all depends on how much time you want. So some people, you know, they'll do option period as little as 3 days. I don't recommend that because it's really hard to get a good turnaround in 3 days with your general inspections. Some people will offer 7 days, some people will offer 10. But basically, the more you ask for an option period, the more money you're going to want to put up front. So your option period is non-refundable. So you just tell the seller, hey, I'm going to give you this much for these amount of days to let me do my due diligence on the property. And that is also due within 3 days. So if you don't have that turned in within 3 days, then you're in breach of contract and you can lose your earnest money as well. So the two things you want to make sure that you have when you are looking to go under contract on a house is you want to make sure you're ready to turn in your earnest money and your option money within 3 days. And then the other thing you want to be ready to pay for is your general inspections and any other inspections that you're going to want to do on the subject property. Okay, and then once you're out of option period from there, we have to go through an appraisal process, and then your lender has to give you the final approval on the property. All of those things will be written into the contract. Other things that are going to be written into the contract would be, are you going to be purchasing a residential service contract? So are you going to be getting a home warranty? Typically, a home warranty on an average size home is about $450, but depending on the home that you're purchasing and, if it has a septic or if it's a much bigger square footage, then you could start paying a little bit more for a home warranty, but it's completely optional. You don't have to get a home warranty when you purchase a property, but it is there for you. So if you want the seller to pay for the home warranty, because the seller will pay for the home warranty, then that is also information that is included in the contract. If you are buying land or a single family residential property, then a survey is going to be involved. So usually the seller will have the survey up front. But if the seller doesn't have the survey, or if the survey is old or outdated and the title company doesn't accept the survey, then in the contract you have to state who is going to pay for a new survey. A lot of times it could go either way. It just really depends on how enticing you want your offer to be. So you can ask the seller to pay for a new survey, or you can pay for a new survey as well. And the cost for a new survey, that all depends on the size of the property as well. It can be anywhere from $500 and up. I mean, again, a lot of these costs are just variable, but the survey is something that can be also paid at closing. It doesn't necessarily have to be paid up front. So right now, the only upfront costs we have once you go into contract would be your earnest and your option money, and then, whatever you're going to pay for your due diligence period. Another thing that we're going to have to talk about when you're submitting an offer is what items are going to convey with the home. So the seller usually has this, already worked out with their agent when they go to list their property. But if you're a buyer and you're walking into a home and you really like that fridge, but that refrigerator doesn't convey, you can ask the seller to leave that for you. So in real estate, everything is negotiable. Just because it's advertised as it doesn't include washer and dryer doesn't mean that you can't ask for them to leave the washer and dryer behind for you. So a lot of those things are negotiable as well when it comes to submitting your offer. And another thing you have to think about when you're doing an offer is your HOA transfer fees. So usually the seller will pay for the HOA transfer fees, and the buyer will put up a certain amount. So the buyer can say, in HOA transfer fees, again, it depends on if your property is even in an HOA and how much are the transfer fees. But for example, let's just say the HOA transfer fees are $1,000. Well, then the buyer can say, I'll give you $500 towards the HOA transfer fees. You pay the difference. But those are other terms that you're going to have to think about when you are writing up a contract to present to a seller. Other scenarios that you might need to think about when you are writing up a offer for a seller is if you're going to have a contingency with the offer, meaning if you do have a house that you need to sell first before buying a property, then you need to have a contingency saying, I'm going to purchase this property from you as long as my property sells first. And that always isn't the best case scenario when submitting an offer. And usually if you do want to go that route, then you want to make sure that your property is already on the market, or preferably already pending, because a seller is going to look at those things and say, okay, well, he wants to sell his property first, but it's still on the market and it's been on the market for X amount of days. A lot of those things are going to be factored in. So again, it's a case-by-case scenario. And if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't even have to worry about this part. But if you do currently own a home and you want to sell it first before buying a property, then that is also going to be included with your contract. And then, whatever seller concessions that you're going to be asking for is going to be included in the offer contract as well. So concessions is basically something that the buyer is asking for the seller to pay for towards their closing costs. And if you do submit an offer with a lender, then you are going to need the third-party financing addendum. And the third-party financing addendum is basically just saying, I am purchasing this home with a lender, and my interest rate can't exceed this much for 30 years, and this is the amount that I'm financing, and it is subject to approval. This is another part where you, as a buyer, if your lender, let's just say the home doesn't appraise or the lender can't get you approved for the house, well, then, you do have an out with this third party financing addendum. And, as long as it's under the terms that's listed on the third party financing addendum and you can't purchase the property because your financing didn't get approved, then you can get your earnest money back. But don't forget, option money is non-refundable. So once you submit that offer and you have all those terms that we just talked about in there, then the listing agent is going to review the offer with their seller, and hey, best case scenario, they'll accept your offer right away. But in most cases, they're going to counter. A good listing agent is going to counter back, especially if you didn't come in right at asking price, or, there's just not as many favorable terms for the seller. But so I would expect to counter back. And at this part, this is where your realtor really comes into play, because they're going to guide you through how to really counter these offers. So just depending on what the seller comes back at, they might say, give me 10 grand more and we got a deal. And, this is where you depend on your agent to say, is that a reasonable ask? And your agent will give you their best professional opinion and say, yes or no, this is a reasonable ask, or no, it's not a reasonable ask. I think you should counter back with this. But either way it goes, both parties are going to go back and forth in countering until they can agree on terms. So once you submit your offer, again, you're going to submit your offer. They're probably going to counter, and you guys might go back and forth a couple of times until you can agree on terms. But once you officially agree on terms, then your contract gets executed, and that's when your option period starts. And that's the time for when you need to make sure you deliver your earnest money, your option money, and you get all your inspections lined up. So if you need to renegotiate any terms, that can all be done by the time your option period ends. Another thing, once the contract gets executed, is the lender is going to start doing their part, in which they're going to order the appraisal, and they're going to make sure that the property does appraise for the price that you are purchasing at. So here's something that back in 2020, 2021 was a little iffy, because we had to do a lot of offers with appraisal waivers, but that's really not happening as much these days. But basically, when an appraisal happens, a lender sends out a third party, and they're going to look at the property that you're looking to purchase, and they're going to come up with a value on that property, and they're going to bring it back to the lender and say the property is worth this much. So if you offered $500,000 on a home, and the appraiser comes back and says it's worth 510, congratulations, you have $10,000 worth of equity at closing, which is a good thing. That's what you want. But there are cases where you can offer $500,000 on a house, and an appraiser can come back and say, oh no, this house is only worth $460,000. Well, then that's not a good situation, because now we have to figure out who's going to pay the difference here. And so the listing agent and the buyer agent can talk it out. They can negotiate that, and they can agree to lower the purchase price of the home, or they can split it, whatever terms they want to come to. And a buyer's agent can go back to the lender and say they disagree with the results of the appraisal, and the lender and the appraiser can talk it over, and they can do another review and see if, yeah, maybe they missed something on the appraisal and it is worth a little bit more. Either way it goes, once the appraisal process is done, the lender can move forward with approving the loan finally, and then we can just wait for lender and title to start balancing everything out so we can have a successful close on the property. Another thing is, once you're under contract on a property, then the title company is going to be running, what they do is their title commitment, and they're going to be checking to make sure there's no clouds on the title, meaning that there's nothing on the property that can prevent you from having complete ownership of the home, or that there's nobody that can later on down the line come back and say, hey, this property wasn't sold correctly, so this technically doesn't belong to you. So once you go into contract on a property, the title company is also going to open title title on the property. And all they do is they just run a check on the property and make sure there's no clouds on the title, meaning that there's nothing that prevents the transfer of this sale. So, if it was a foreclosure property or a probate sale or whatever scenario it could be, there's just no one in the future that can come back and say, hey, this property didn't legally belong to this person, or this transaction shouldn't have been done, so I want this property back. It's their job to prevent that from happening. They're also going to ensure the boundary lines of your property. So they're going to have that survey that you or the seller pay for, or if it's already provided, even better. But they're going to have the survey, and on that survey, they're going to look at it and make sure that there's no encroachments, meaning, there's no like trees that are crossing over into your property line, or there's no, sheds from your neighbor crossing over into your property line. And if that stuff is there, we're going to, in the contract, it's going to state who's going to take care of removing that, or if we're just going to just leave it as is. But the title will give you what is called a title commitment. And really, that's the title company's job. They're just a neutral party for the buyer and the seller. They provide them all their options and explain everything that's going on in details when it comes to transferring the ownership of the home. Once you get the title commitment, you can read over those documents. The title company can look over it with you. Your agent can look over it with you. But you just make sure you're okay with everything that's written in that document. And then title will continue to move on and just, work with the lender and all the parties involved to make sure that we can come to a successful close. And really, that's their job. They're just another party that a home buyer or home seller can reach out to if they have any questions, but it is their job to make sure that they stay neutral. They just provide the facts, and then they make sure that the deed gets transferred over successfully. So once you make it through the option period, and then you make it through the appraisal process, then the title and the lender, they're just going to work to make sure everything balances out together. They'll be doing all that work on the back end. Meanwhile, during this time, while you're waiting, it's really, really, really important. I should have said this earlier, but it's really, really, really important that when you are purchasing a home and you are using a lender to purchase a home, that you do not spend any money, you don't open any extra lines of credits, or you don't start swiping the current credit cards that you have, because that can really throw off your pre-approval. Do not buy anything. No new cars, no appliances, no furniture, nothing until you close on the property. I should have said that earlier, but you want to make sure while you're waiting to close on the property, I know it's a really exciting time, but you can window shop at whatever furniture store you want to window shop at, but do not buy anything until you close on the property. Because if you buy something too soon and you open a new line of credit, I promise you, I've seen it happen all the time. You get right down to the day of closing and the lender runs a check, and then they say, oh, we can't close anymore because you just took out a $4,000 line of credit, and this throws off your qualifications. So just make sure you don't do that. So we've made it through option period, and we've made it through the appraisal process. And then now we just wait for the title and the lending to work together to help us get to the closing table. And once the lender has everything approved by underwriting and all of the documentation that they needed has been approved, then the lender is going to give you what is called clear to close. The day before you close, or the day that you close, you do want to do a final walkthrough before you close on the property. And in this final walkthrough that you do, you're going to be doing it with your realtor, but when you do the final walkthrough, you just want to make sure everything is left the way the contract says it should be left. You want to make sure there's no damages done to the home. You want to make sure if any repairs were negotiated up front, that the seller did those repairs. You want to make sure if any items were supposed to be left behind, like a refrigerator, washer, dryer, that they are left behind in the property. But the final walkthrough, you just want to make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. So after you hear clear to close, you're going to be receiving a closing statement, and the closing statement is going to have all of the settlement costs, and it's going to show the exact amount that you need to bring to the closing table for when it's time to close on the property. And the day before you close, you do want to make sure that you schedule a final walkthrough. So you can do this the day before you close, or you can do this the day of closing, but you just want to make sure before you go to the title company and sign on those documents, that you walk the subject property that you are purchasing, because you want to make sure everything is the way the contract says it should be. Once you schedule closing, you're going to go to the title company, and the title company is going to have a stack of papers for you to sign. But don't worry, you're not going to be alone. Your realtor is going to be there with you, and your title rep is also going to be there. And the title rep is going to be explaining everything that you're signing. You're going to give them the check for the closing cost. And then once all of that is signed, then all you need to do from there is we wait for the property to be funded. And once the property is funded, then everything is yours. You get the keys to your house, you pop your champagne, and you celebrate. And you are officially a homeowner at that point. So that's the home buying process. And now you are a little bit more educated on the process, and you know what to expect from here. And if you're ready to really start putting a plan in place so you can purchase your home within the next 12 months, then I would highly suggest that you reach out to an agent. If you're in the Austin area, I'd love to work with you, but reach out to me and we can set up a home buyer's consultation, and we can talk a little bit more about the type of property that you're looking for, and we can start narrowing down your home search and get you in the right home. All right, everybody. So I hope you found this information useful, and I hope whatever your plans are this year, if they are for you to become a homeowner, that you accomplish those goals. All right, everyone. Talk to you later.